Good evening. You're either watching or listening to Redwood Wonk. I'm with David Frank. My name is Eric Kirk. We are talking national political news of the day, and we're going to start with the playground bullies in action, testosterone all over the place. Actually, we'll talk about one person who is not male, but briefly, I don't know what's going on in Congress. It does appear to be a Republican issue, but we have an elbow incident between former leader McCarthy and Tim Burkett of Tennessee. One elbowed the other elbowed back. I'm just going to repeat what the live blog said. It seems that McCarthy shoved or threw an elbow at Burkett. Burkett initially tried to respond jokingly, but when McCarthy ignored him, he yelled, "Hey, Kevin, you got any guts?" Burkett then ran down the hallway to catch him, his tan coat flapping, to confront McCarthy again. McCarthy denied touching him, and Burkett called him a jerk. Some members asked what had happened on their way out of the votes a couple of hours later, and Burkett has been flocked by reporters ever since. So we had this incident between Burkett, who I assume is in the Freedom Caucus, and so that might be a source
Yeah.
of the attention. And then Bernie Sanders had to basically break up a fight. A potential fight. Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullen stood up and tried to fight labor leader Sean O'Brien. He's the head of the Teamsters. But I mean, literally, they were like children. And Bernie Sanders had to tell him, "You're a senator. Sit down." And he was, but literally, they were going to fight. I mean, they both. Mullen stood up. I'm not sure if O'Brien actually stood up, but O'Brien wasn't exactly responding in a productive manner either. And then you've got somebody wearing blue. Kate Riga alerted somebody to another confrontation and instigated by another Republican man. Apparently, Representative James Comer called Representative Jared Moskowitz a Smurf because he was wearing blue. I mean, it's anyway. We've got this going on. Then last week, in the debate last Wednesday night, there was an incident in which Ramaswamy had a good point, but broke the cardinal rule of politics. You don't attack people's children unless you happen to be Trump attacking Biden's son. But other than that, there is supposed to be you're supposed to leave children out of it. On the other hand, Nikki Haley had been criticizing, slamming him for his association with with social media and the Instagram, pardon me, and he said he pointed out that her daughter was on it, and she said, "Don't have my daughter's name in your voice," and then later called him scum. And then, just to round things out, we've had Trump throwing tantrums day after day about the trial, but then he went and made a speech and he referred to his opponents as vermin, reminiscent of basically Hitler and Mussolini. It was very similar and very chilling, the speech. I mean, we're at a very low point in politics. Not that this stuff hasn't happened before. We have had brawls in Congress, as far back as the 19th century, but there seems to be a wave of it right now. And maybe it's because the Republicans are under a lot of tension. They had a real bad election result last week. They don't know what to do about the abortion issue, and now they don't know what they're going to do about the government being shut down. We'll talk about that in the third segment, but there's a big chance that the government could be shut down again in January, just in time for the election season to come on, and they're frustrated. Dave, what's going on?
Well, that's a loaded question a little bit here. Honestly, I don't know if there is an explanation that really covers the entirety of all of these little discrete, not that they're little, but these discrete incidents. But it's, let's start with the big picture. Like you mentioned Trump. You mentioned how Trump actually pulled language out of some historic Hitler texts in his tweets but they're not tweets anymore. They're Truth Social messages. But anyway, he's out there, reaching for, or maybe he lives permanently in the lowest common denominator. He's to rabble rouse the troops, get the base energy going. Um, so that's the tone. It came out this week that Trump actually, when around the January 6th events, when there was talk of him,
Yeah,
not being able to be an effective, effectively no longer represent the party. He said, "I'll have to start my own party," and they took it to heart because they embraced him, and everybody changed gears. That behavior that was considered out of bounds or crossing the line, they just changed the game rules, and there's no longer out of bounds, and there's no longer lines in many ways, not fully, but metaphorically speaking. So that's the environment in which they're operating in. I think maybe we could take these one by one, and I'll kind of go back and forth
sure.
with you. I think the easiest one to sort of, I don't know if dismiss is the right word, but when James Comer was from Kentucky, he's the chair of a committee. He was getting pressure about the hearings, the Hunter Biden and the Biden crime family hearings. Democrats were pressuring him and basically saying, "You said there was a smoking gun, but there's no smoking gun. The thing that you guys pointed to is stuff that your own family finances are guilty of, lending each other money and paying each other money." And he got very defensive. He lashed out at both Representative Moskowitz and Representative Goldman, and he said, he called Goldman Mr. Trust Fund, basically calling him a trust fund baby. And then for Moskowitz, he said, "You look like a Smurf." Presumably that's because he was wearing a bright blue suit.
Blue suit. Yeah,
And then they asked him for, the Moskowitz was saying, "Hey, I want my time back," and he was like, he wouldn't yield. He just said, "We'll just stop the clock because I'm going to say what I'm going to say." And he just lashed out aggressively, negatively, somewhat hysterically. So that's that. Now we're talking about the tone and the temperament, the lack of respect and cordiality, and then so I don't know if you have anything to say about that one, or if that one kind of speaks for
no, I
itself.
mean, I will comment that Moskovitz in his Twitter said Gargamel was very angry today, which is a reference to an arch villain of the Smurfs in the
Yeah,
cartoons, apparently. I
yeah.
mean, it's just, it's comical. That one probably isn't the biggest deal. It's just, it's just a little bit out of bounds. And again, showing a little bit of pressure. And Comer's got a lot of pressure on him. He's got to come up with something to justify, the promises of his committee. And if he comes up
Yeah.
empty, he won't be heading that committee next year.
Yeah, even like Nancy Mace, I remember she was talking about this and she said, "Hey, I've been told we have evidence." So she's a Republican Congress member from, I think, South Carolina, if that's right, or Georgia. I forget what state she's from right now off the top of my head. But she basically was saying, like, we have stuff. They told me we have stuff. So maybe they're just not even being truthful with themselves because they're so. And I say they, I don't mean to blanket cover. The Gates Eight, they're called. Some people are calling them the hateful eight or whatever they're
Yeah,
calling them. But so it's Matt Gates' eight. But we're going to talk about the government shutdown later. It's not just Gates and the eight
sure.
people that surround him. It's over 90 people are kind of voting together. So it's not just this. But so the second one I think is worth mentioning, and also this one's pretty quick because I want to spend more time on the third one. But so this second one is Representative Burchett, Tennessee. McCarthy, he was in the middle of an interview. So there was a journalist
Hmm.
who, I mean, I read through some of the comments, articles, tweets, whatever about this. It sounded like he actually like lost his balance and kind of stumbled towards her. So it wasn't just like somebody was being a bully and just bumping into somebody like, "I can make you move and interrupt you." He actually to a certain extent knocked him off his feet, not to the ground, but Burchett basically, and this is Kevin McCarthy, former speaker. Burchett did vote against him as speaker, so there is some personal animosity. But this is what I thought was interesting. There was a confrontation. There were witnesses. There was a That's assault. It's assault if hurt, elbow someone in an organ and cause pain. I mean, you and I can't do that to people we disagree with. We would lose our jobs, or we might get a disorderly person's offense. So it was not insignificant. Not that we're turning into snowflakes or anything, but it was a little bit out of bounds. So Kevin McCarthy, but when interviewed about this, he just says, "I didn't do it. If I kidney punched somebody, they would know it."
They would know it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, well, the guy said you hurt him, so you have a witness saying that you caused pain. He knew it, right? So it's just one of those things. Lastly on this, Bruchette said, like, look, this is how McCarthy rolls. He's been a bully, but he's a bully like somebody who throws a rock at you and then hides behind your mom's skirt, because, like, he says, like, yes, how tough are you when you cause some physical confrontation, but you have your own private security details surrounding you. He basically, Bruchette, this is a Congress member, said you should look somebody in the eye when you have something to say to them, not give them a cheap shot. So I think Kevin McCarthy, this is maybe unique to him, that he kind of wore out the goodwill, and I couldn't tell you why he did it, but it's just one of those things where it's just a fluke that, or he's just lost his composure. And I don't know. I have nothing to say about why he could possibly do it or why it's happening all at the same time. But do you have anything more to say about McCarthy kind of going rogue
No,
here?
I think he's just, he's really upset about what happened, and there's a lot of bad blood, and this,
Yeah.
so even a minor thing is going to be turned into a major thing, and this is again after having a really bad election day. I think that there is a lot of doom and gloom right in the Republicans right now about losing the House, even if they win the Senate and the presidency. That would interfere with their ability to get a lot of things done. And this is also even hurting their chances on that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of stress, but
Yeah.
and it's not the first time this type of thing happened. I mean, and I just real quickly point out in 1856 there was Republican anti-slavery Senator Charles Sumner was actually hit over the head with a cane by a couple of soon-to-be Confederate senators, and was knocked unconscious. I mean, and bleeding, and was carried away. And they couldn't even get a censure resolution through to get the attacker through. So it's not like this is totally out of the ordinary. We've all seen those YouTube videos of huge brawls breaking out in some parliamentary countries. I think South Korea had a couple of them, and the rest. It's not quite at that level, not yet, anyway.
And people have said that there's violence, in the 19th century leading up to mid 19th century leading up to the Civil War, that Congress members were not above using violence to get their way or to shut people down. Like you said, there's countries all over the world where you see brawls break out. So, where animosity is high, that people are going to behave accordingly, which I think leads us to the most interesting of the three incidents that happened, which is in the, there was union leaders attending the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, chaired by Bernie Sanders. And so in particular, we're talking about Senator Markwayne Mullin.
Yeah.
I didn't know the backstory on this until I heard it last night. So I think this is actually pretty interesting. So I don't know if let's just say you said what happened, right? So we had
and if anybody wants to do it, just look up Mullen, O'Brien, Sanders video. You can go to YouTube. Yeah. It's all over YouTube. It's on Twitter. Greg Price is where I got it from, but it's a very interesting exchange, and really kudos to Bernie Sanders for kind of taking control of the narrative and basically telling them, especially Mullen, but both of them, to grow up.
Gotcha. Okay, so the key little bullet points here is that Senator Mullen, he read a Twitter comment from Sean O'Brien, Teamsters Union president. They had beef in the past. since a hearing back in March. And one of those tweets was talking directly about Mullen, saying he's a greedy CEO who pretends like he's self-made. In reality, he's just a clown and a fraud. He always has been. He always will be. Quit the tough guy act in those Senate hearings. You know where to find me. Any place, anytime, cowboy. Which immediately, Mullen called him out on the spot, wanting to stand off. The union leader accepted the challenge. And then so Bernie Sanders, the de-escalation you just described, the quote is, "You're a United States senator. Sit down. We're not here to talk about physical abuse."
Yeah.
So it was like you said, bully behavior. But I think that the deal is like there's a takeaway here, that this guy Mullen, he really wanted a personal gotcha confrontation in front of the cameras. He knew there wasn't going to actually be a fight in the Senate, obviously.
Sure.
They could have been talking about very important national priorities. They could have been talking specifics. They had union leaders. They had Sean Fain from UAW,
Right.
Sean O'Brien from the Teamsters. There's a lot of things that they could have been talking about.
And let's point out that there is a lot of resentment with both those union leaders, because both of them recently had very successful strikes, and and in the business community there's a lot of resentment about it, and Mullen obviously speaks for the business community.
Yeah, and so this was that little background piece, that is a little gem that I heard. Senator Mullen, he inherited his plumbing company from his father, from his family. I don't know if it was his father, from his family. He built it up into a successful company. He claims he took it from 6 employees to 300, even though he says he started with absolutely nothing, below nothing. So that's not entirely consistent, maybe. But so Teamsters realized how effective he was at bidding, and the pipe fitters union did protest in front of his house, and they made it highly personal. They called him out for, well, how rich are you in public? How much money did you make? And then he said, I only made $50,000 because I put all my money back into my company. And they said, oh, then you were hiding money. And so he got back in March. He just got really mad. And so this was very, very personal and sort of out of scope for what I think we could. It was bigger and worse than it should have been, but it's just the nature of I guess the animosity that you said exists right now, anti-union sentiment.
A lot of political theater involved in that, but I think we've said about as much as it deserves.
Yeah.
I think they understand that they have nothing as it relates to a case other than an overzealous attorney general who would destroy all of New York business by going after transactions where there are no victims. It's a disgrace that this is happening right now, but I think we'll make our points, we'll make our case, and we'll go on from there.
Okay, that brings us to more grown-up stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about the Trump trial. We didn't talk about it last week, and the trial, the ongoing trial for fraud that the Attorney General in New York has, Letitia James has filed, and Letitia James has rested, called the sons, called Trump, called Ivanka. All of them seem to know nothing about how any of it happened. Eric Trump famously said, "I'm not into appraisals. I'm into construction," as if he's ever worked a day in construction, actually. But they're brought onto the stand. Analysis is pretty much they just confirmed everything that was said in the depositions, and which is basically the Trump family saying, oh, they relied on their accountants and their appraisers and weren't really involved in that, and also argue that it was that they actually didn't aggravate or exaggerate the value of their properties, but not really entering evidence. Right now it's in the defense's court. The prosecution rested, and of course Trump's attorneys immediately moved for directed verdict, didn't get it. So now we're in the second half. As of today, Donald Trump is filing for a mistrial, claiming that the judge is biased. Of course, all the carrying on was really between him and his attorneys. It was notable that his attorney, I'm forgetting her name, but the youngish woman, went out right after the Eric Fraud testimony and basically attacked the judge, Enrigan, just like Trump had done. And the judge is allowed for himself to be attacked, but not the clerk. And the fact that Trump keeps trying to attack the clerk, he's gotten fined for. Yes, Alina Habba is the name of the attorney. Thank you, Matt. So at any rate, it's going on, and it seems like what the lawyers are doing isn't so much even trying to defend against the case, but to defend him politically by going out and attacking the judge. Nobody reports on Eric Trump's testimony, which is not that interesting, but gave Letitia James what she needed for the prima facie case moving in. Experts say that Trump is going to lose this trial, appeal it, and then just claim like he did when he was basically found guilty of forcefully fingering a woman, and just say, oh, this is just New York juries, they're out to get me, or New York justice. And so with that, there's a lot of different angles to go on, but it's basically Trump is trying to deal with the politics of it, probably having resigned to losing the case. Letitia James is focused on the case. What's going to happen? Well, it could mean that Trump isn't allowed to do business in New York anymore, and a few other consequences. But I'll let you in, Dave.
Yeah, I think, like just starting from at the basic level, there wasn't much new ground, because where this case really starts from in the public sphere here, Judge Engoron has already decided that they're liable for fraud. He's basically made a determination. And I think that when you start out by saying, look, I'm just declaring that you've committed fraud, now the question is, let's get to the bottom of how much the penalty is going to be, facing potentially hundreds of millions of dollars here. That's to a certain extent sets the tone, where Trump's really trying to try this in the court of public opinion, he and his legal team. Bringing the kids in, I think calling them kids, and when they're middle-aged professional millionaires, they're perfectly capable of defending themselves and speaking behalf of themselves. But it's a family business. I guess I understand why he would at least try to insulate them a little bit from it as a parent. But the reality is, like Don Jr. in his testimony, like you alluded to, he really just said, hey, we have accountants for this. You're asking me something that I'm not a professional. I'm not a professional numbers guy. I don't know this stuff.
Yeah.
So why am I even here? And then he hyped up the value of the properties, hyped up Trump's real estate vision and artistry, and it seems like a sideshow.
They're geniuses at their business, but they don't really run it. I mean, that's the gist. They rely on their underlings to run it, but they're the geniuses.
Right. I thought Trump said something pretty interesting when he said, look, valuing Mar-a-Lago at $18 million is not, that's not even close. I don't even know where that comes from. He said you couldn't even build the atrium for $18 million. Yeah. So
where it comes from, just so in case nobody knows, is that's what he reported in order to not have to pay a lot of property taxes. He got it reduced from a 46 million or something like that down to 18 million. That was his doing. And I think what he wants to be able to argue is, well, that was just so I can get out of taxes. That doesn't mean that's what it was worth.
I mean, assessments and appraisals, I'm not sure how that operates in Florida, to be honest. But one of the things that I did hear was that because of the legal limitations on how that property can be used, it can't be fully valued. It's a private club, and as a private club, you're not creating the revenue stream that like a hotel would create, or condos. So for people that are used to living in the world of Florida beachfront mansions or estate real estate, it's not like that. It's a very specialized thing.
And to expand on that a little bit, even in California here, our assessed property values tend to be somewhat below market value. The government does that on purpose, just so people don't routinely challenge the valuation based on their taxes. Of course, people want it to be valued high when they're getting loans and low when they're being taxed, and so this allows them to kind of be the Schrodinger tax thing. It's fine, but the fact of the matter is Trump got it lowered from 46 million to 18 million. You know, you don't get to claim that it doesn't mean anything.
Right. And I think, the judge, the reporting was that the judge gave Trump's team a lot of leeway to just say all the good things they want to say about their genius and their artistry and their values and all the things that they add to the real estate universe, even if it's not germane to the case at hand, because the judge explicitly said, I need to give them leeway because they're going to appeal. And we need to give them as few grounds as possible to appeal. So let them say what they want to say.
He even let Trump lay into him. Say about
Yeah.
how he was biased, and he just sat there and shrugged.
Which I think
this judge is very patient.
Totally. Which I was going to say, I think that kind of plays into the most current event here, and what might be the most interesting piece is we all knew that Trump's going to appeal everything to the end of the earth here, but this filing for a mistrial I think is pretty interesting because it's I looked into the motion a little bit, and they dug into Judge Engoron's writings about the case. He wrote something about the case for a school that he was an alumni of, and they're citing the New York law that says a judge shall not make any public comment about a pending or impending proceeding in any court within the United States or its territory. So they're saying, look, he's guilty already of publicly commenting on his own trial. And
if that's the case, that was inappropriate. You're not supposed to do it. You don't. Jurors aren't supposed to do it. Nobody's supposed to do it while it's happening. Afterwards, fine, but not during the trial. And that is a mistake. It's more set for jury trials so that a judge doesn't lead on a jury, but it's inappropriate anyway. He shouldn't have done that if that's what he did. So I don't know if it get him a mistrial, but
exactly. So you read my mind. You're the lawyer here, but so what I was thinking is they also complained about the law clerk, saying that the law clerk would, give an unprecedented and inappropriate latitude. That's just because the law clerk supposedly she would come over to the judge and give comments, and then he would say, overruled or sustained. And so the clerk was heavily involved in the day-to-day proceedings.
But that's normal. That's why you have a clerk.
Exactly.
To help you. They do the research and they come and they help you advise on your rulings. That's the whole point of a clerk.
Bingo, right? Thank you. So you read my mind. That's where I wanted to go, is that he's filing a mistrial, or they are filing a mistrial because they have to maximize their defensive posture here. And so when you hear about it in the news, you say, oh, the judge said his house is only worth 18 million. That's not good. The judge wrote down something in some journal. That's not good. So they're trying to try the case, or attempting to have the case, be assessed or appraised in the court of public opinion, which is not where legal proceedings are adjudicated. So he's really, he and his team, they're fighting reputational risk versus actual legal liability.
Yeah, no, he's running for president while everybody else is conducting a trial and the rest. I mean, my guess is they've given up on it, that they're not going to do business in New York anymore, at least not in that way. And the rest, but it's it's kind of there was a meme a while back about a father and his infant son playing chess, and the father's got chess pieces and actually the kid has checkers pieces, right? So they're playing a different game. They're doing totally different things. They have completely different agendas, and even Trump's attorneys, again, out there, not when she went out, not commenting on any of the testimony or what it meant, or even pumping up, Eric Trump, saying, oh, he withheld and stood. She didn't talk about Eric Trump at all. Eric Trump, the only mistake he made that was noticeable was denying that he was involved with a particular person where she had all the emails and the rest. And it's not particularly memorable because we've all seen, or anybody who's paying attention has seen, the depositions, but depositions aren't evidence in trial except for very specific purposes, such as impeachment and the rest. You can't just introduce a deposition without a special motion. So you got to get everything out a second time, even though they were in oath the first time, because you got to be subject to objection to things that don't happen at depositions. So it doesn't seem real exciting because everybody's saying, well, we already knew that. And it's like, yes, but the court can only take it into account once it becomes on the trial record, not sitting in a deposition, unless the parties stipulated and said, we don't have to call them. We both agree that the deposition is fine with the following provisions taken out, blah, blah, blah. That does happen, but it didn't happen this time around. And there's not a lot of love between these attorneys anyways, so.
And so there was also Trump making comments that Letitia James sits in the courtroom and smirks at him the whole time. That's personal and nothing to do with the case. But you did sort of say you suspect that one of the punishment, you didn't sort of say it. You said that one of the punishments potentially is to no longer be able to do business in the state of New York. My question to you is, maybe this is a layperson's position, but couldn't you just pick up roots and say, okay, now all of these organizations like sign over control to a shell company based out of Delaware or the Cayman Islands or something?
Do not have a lot of experience in business litigation, but it's going to be a very complicated thing, and it'll be focused. It won't mean that they can't do business in New York. It just means that they can't do it in a certain way and through certain types of organizations. They would have to change the way they do business significantly. And so, at any rate, it's a very complicated one, and I don't have time to even explain what I understand about it. And there's certain things I don't even understand about it. Listening to the comments made by the attorneys and reading the briefing, it's kind of a complicated deal here. And it's really not, something that is amenable. But right now, again, it's about, for Trump right now, it's just about political theater, because I think they know they're going to lose, and I think they know that it'll be upheld on appeal.
And one last comment here before we move on. There's 91 indictments and 4 trials, and most of them have to do with January 6th or possession of documents. And then the third one out there is the sexual the payment to somebody to cover up an affair. But so this seems like the furthest most of importance for most people. So this is really just getting things warmed up. The impact is financial as opposed to criminal, and that it's not going to impact his presidency. It'll just impact him in the wallet.
Yeah. Well, if this theater was a product of stress, I think we can expect to find a lot more theater in the trials coming up, assuming that they go forward. But they, of course, are trying to get them put off until after the election, hoping they can shake it all together. But we will be talking about those cases more in the future.
Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst.
I have good news for the American people. This Friday night, there will be no government shutdown. Thank you. Because of bipartisan cooperation, we are keeping the government open without any poison pills or harmful cuts to vital programs. A great outcome for the American people.
Our final topic is the politics of the potential shutdown, which has been averted. When we first talked about taking this topic on, it wasn't quite certain, and there's still a few things that need to happen. But the House, of course, has been in turmoil over this because the Freedom Caucus types really do want to close down the government. They feel that it's necessary to make their points about the spending and the types of spending that they want and don't want. And They just feel entitled to do this. And McCarthy lost his position as Speaker of the House largely over this type of politics. What are happening now is Johnson is in there. He's got a lot of pressure. He's got to try to make everybody happy, but he also knows that the way that the political dynamics have gone, and the way even the right-wing media has covered it, is that everybody knows that if the government is shut down, it's squarely the Republicans' fault. They can't just say, oh, this is a bipartisan problem, blah, 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 because they know there are Republicans who want to shut the government down. They want it. And they are in really airtight, beat red districts where they're not going to lose the next election anyway. But meanwhile, there are a slew of Republicans, I think somewhere between 20 and 30, we've counted, maybe as many as 40, in competitive districts, many of them who, more than half of them which went to Biden last time, who are worried that if there is a government shutdown, they will not get reelected. The government shutdown can have all kinds of impacts. And so the Johnson, under pressure from everybody, actually put together a stopgap bill that drew support from the Democrats. Well, we can talk about what's in it, but it's more interesting to know that all but I think 3 Democrats voted for it, and just slightly over half, actually I think under half of the Republicans voted for it. I think what was it, like 127 voted against and 90 something voted for it. But this was yet again a bipartisan bypassing of the Freedom Caucus of these people, and it's expected to pass in the Senate pretty quickly. Biden had indicated his support for it. Probably wasn't helping Mike Johnson out in terms of the internal Republican politics, but probably makes him look better nationally. So we will not have a government shutdown this Friday. It's been punted down the road to, I think, January 24th or something like that would be the next crisis. And sooner or later, the Republicans want to be able to shut down the government to register their protests. Well, of course, that's right during as the election season for the president and Congress take off. It just seems like, as you know, again, we talked about it in the first segment, the stress that the Republicans are under, because you've got different agendas within the Republican Party, and people wanting to make sure they get reelected, and other people who don't care. They want their legacy to be that they, fought the power or whatever. There's a lot to go on here, but Dave, what are your thoughts on it, and what do you know about the bill itself?
Yeah, so I thought this was really interesting because the headline is, the government a shutdown was averted. There was a bipartisan vote, and now we just have this sort of truce, kick the can scenario all the way to January 19th, I think is the date. So the Senate has been working on a bill that is basically that, and across the board, single bill, fully fund through January 19th, 2024. That's what the White House wanted. That's what the Senate wanted. Or longer, right? But that's what they're working on right now. But so the House, this was very different. And I think that, Speaker Johnson, he actually should get a degree of credit here for his he proposed a clean bill. He basically said, let's have no divisive amendments. Let's have no spending cuts. Let's just do it for like a year. Let's just make this a non-issue because it's going to be used against us in the election. We know it's going to be used against us in the election. We don't want to be that. That's not us. And but the moderates didn't want it. The conservatives didn't want it. So he didn't have that as an option. So he came up with this bill. And I don't mean to give him too much credit here because,
sure.
But a broken clock is right twice a day. What he ended up doing was he averted the shutdown during the holidays, that's what Americans wanted. But what he did, he also he placated, he pandered, and he said, okay, well, I'm gonna give a little bit of good faith here to my the Freedom Caucus folks. He created a 2-tiered bill, and he just said, okay, look, if this doesn't pass, then the only thing we're going to do is all in. We're going to do a whole year of nothing gets increases, only defense and national security, or you pass this. And he said, Democrats take it or leave it, Republicans take it or leave it, and he ended up getting 127 Republicans on board against 93.
Okay. All right.
209 Democrats versus 2. He needed 2/3. He needed 66% to go along, because he used a rare rule, which just said, if I can get 2/3 of the people to do it, then we go direct to, vote on my bill. And he just forced it through. So that actually is exhibiting leadership. But you asked, your specific question was what's in the bill. So this 2-tiered bill thing is super weird. He's saying that the 4 bills that the Republicans wanted to, cut social programs and grandstand about their, the political theater, about all the things that they're against, the culture war, that I'm going to extend to January 19th. But 8 other bills that we don't really want to grandstand on, 8 other spending bills, appropriations bills, that we'll extend that to January 2nd. So he's focusing everybody's attention on his more conservative members and saying, what are the things you want to change? What are the things you want to cut? How do you want to show, the country that what we stand for, to shrink this government? And there's the housing, transportation, housing, and urban development bill is one of those 4. So I'm just going to use this as an example, because I think this shows like what they're after. So number 1, they were going to cut Amtrak. They're going to slightly increase housing grants and for programs, but specific programs they're going to target heavily. So, for example, Congressman Norman from South Carolina, he wants to weaken the it's called the equal access rule that he wants to allow discrimination against transgender people trying to access homeless shelters. That was like an almost even vote on the amendment. They actually they actually debated for a while. That got shot down 212 to 217. But that just shows you there's 212 Republicans who were like, yes, let's discriminate. And then so Breachin from Oklahoma, he wants to cut the Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Act entirely, the funding to that. That's 174 to 252. That was a little bit less popular, because it's a little harder to say, yeah, I'm against fair housing and equal opportunity. But there's still 174 Republicans in the House who want to cut that. And then here's one more example, and then I'll defer here. Warren Davidson, Ohio, wants to eliminate all funding for housing opportunities for people with AIDS. So 144 to 282, that got struck down as an idea. But again, there's 144 Republicans who are saying, my constituents want to hear me saying no more money for AIDS, or 174 saying my constituents want to hear me say no more money for fair housing, or 212 that say no more transgender people allowing access to homeless shelters. And there's more. But those are the types of things that they have pet projects that they want to cut as part of this culture warrior mentality.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're in a bizarre era of politics that's kind of reminiscent of the Gilded Age, when there was a lot of selfishness following the radical Reconstruction failure around slavery. This has happened before, but we're in a state where there's such a difference in the priorities of politics. When in the early '80s, Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House on behalf of the Democrats. The Democrats had lost the Senate. They would regain it in 1986, and they obviously lost the presidency. And Tip O'Neill, would have to fend off a lot of people who wanted certain things, not just people on the left, but people who wanted pet projects and all that kind of stuff that they could take home. And he said, look, we do not have the Senate, and we do not have the president. We can rail and we can pass things all the time, but if we actually want to get something done, we're going to have to come up with a bill that will be easily reconciled with whatever the Senate comes up with. It's just basic politics. That's not even on the agenda for 90 so Republicans. It's just not even a consideration for them. We want, and if the Senate doesn't pass it, or the president vetoes it, we don't care. We want, it's a real basic type of politics, and they want more border security. They want cuts, and specific cuts. They don't want funding to Ukraine. They maybe want some to Israel. It's just, and they want to separate those. And by the way, this stopgap measure doesn't account for any aid to either situations.
That's a big deal.
But you've got this politics where Tuberville, and again, the Republicans are even mad at him for blocking all of the appointments to the military, potentially putting the country in national security difficulties all over, because he doesn't want soldiers to be reimbursed travel expenses when they have to leave the state that they're stationed in to go to another state to have an abortion. That's his agenda. He doesn't want those people to have that, and so he's willing to risk the national security on that behalf when we have these troubles. This is the level of politics that we're talking about, and it just it boggles the mind. It's nihilism in a way, that they don't care. They are so focused on their own agenda, and we have had this before. We have had it in American politics, but it's been a while. I think the last time is when McCarthy took over with the communism being everywhere, which became the agenda for several years. Eventually came apart, but it just so what do the Republicans do? They've got a problem. They got to sort it out. They're going to try to blame the Democrats, but that's not going to sell. And so, we're talking about those swing voters in those districts, and they're scared between that and the issue of abortion, which just slams them every which way. As my prediction, by the way, last week is already coming true. Democrats are trying to get abortion on ballot in every state where there's an initiative referendum system. Because they know that's going to hurt, but there's no way that the party as a whole benefits from this. They will be out of power next year, very likely, if they don't change course. But I don't see how they do that, because Matt Gaetz and those people just don't care about that. They just aren't thinking about that.
Yeah, so there's these Venn diagrams of overlapping allegiances, I guess is not the proper word, but lanes. Republicans there have this inner party conflict going on right now, but they basically unanimously elected Johnson as speaker, and he's that nihilism you described of being only interested in their own agenda. Lots of different commentators have said, if you follow him throughout his career, he's a true believer. He comes from a Christian nationalist background. It's not my words. There's a lot of information out there about him. You could look him up, but I think it's telling in what the messaging amendments that signal their priorities that did pass when they tried to get this single bill debated, the housing and urban development, transportation, housing and urban development bill. The one thing that Republicans did stick together on was drug testing for federal housing assistance applicants. So they want to target the poor, the most needy folks. And another one that they passed that were they're called expressions of concern. I hadn't heard of that before. So that was Representative Strong from Alabama. This one is Representative Grothman from Wisconsin. All of these five I mentioned are all Republicans. He got passed, in other words, 18 plus Republicans, expression of concern about the HUD's Diversity Council. So they don't want there to be a diversity council. They think that this is a misguided thing for the government to do. And another one of his amendments also passed, which is they want a expression of support for a study on marital demographics in housing programs. So they basically want to say, see, if you're married, if you're a family, you're being discriminated against by the government because you make too much money. Maybe you're not getting enough housing, or look at the population of people that we're helping. They're not married. So therefore, if you just go ahead and get married, in theory, you would maybe not need the government or something, whatever their actual angle is. These people are, not them all, but all of them, or nearly all of them, voted to say that's what we support. That's what we're behind. We want this. And finally, I'll add to this too. I'm almost certain that it was Speaker Johnson who said this today. I didn't get a chance to research it yet, but that letter from Thomas Jefferson that's credited with creating the tradition in American society of the separation of church and
The wall
state.
separation, yeah.
Yeah, he called that it's a misnomer. He's saying that all of Americans are mistaken, and that Jefferson didn't say what everybody says that he said, that America's history isn't what we're taught that it is. His claim, and you and I have talked about how the Supreme Court kind of has tapped into this too, that in fact they wanted to protect religion from government. So that's where we're headed.
Yeah, we are, and but like I said, so far no motion to, because they still have that goofy rule that the Republicans passed it as a compromise. The first time McCarthy compromised was that a single member could call for basically a no confidence vote, with very similar. So far, they're not doing it. Matt Gaetz is saying not yet, So because boy, if they do that, then they're going to be back into the crisis of, well, who, and who's going to want to step up? I mean, it's just they've got a serious problem. This is why they're getting into scuffles. There is a lot of pressure on them, and the other bad news for them, if you go into right wing sites, is the fact that inflation is taming. And and the rest. If inflation goes down and the economy doesn't fall into a recession in the meantime, that we somehow make it through the inflation without that, then Biden's got the economy, and that also is the situation. And the Democrats are going to campaign on that. They've got real problems, and to the point where they actually are disappointed with that. There were Republicans who expressed disappointment over that report, wondering if it was accurate. Of course, I mean, they always have their conspiracy theories. Of course, the MyPillow guy, for instance, says that last week's elections were also rigged. He's not going on. He's also upset because he doesn't have any money left and his attorneys are quitting. But that's, he's again, they're under stress. This is not a good time for Republicans. Things could rebound for them. If certain things happen, bad things for Biden or whatever, Biden has a McConnell moment or whatever. But right now they are under stress.
Eeny, meeny, chili beanie, the spirits are about to speak.
Are they friendly spirits?
Friendly? Just listen.
This brings us to predictions. Dave, what do you have for us?
This week I was listening to an interview from Senator Manchin from West Virginia, where he said that the Democratic Party and Washington, D.C. have left the citizens behind, that they've turned their backs on hardworking Americans, that reminds him of soldiers returning home from Vietnam, and he's a Democrat, and he says Biden-Harris ticket's not the best for America. He says that both parties are being pulled to the extremes and that they both need to take control back. But in the meantime, he's going to do everything in his power to get a moderate back into power in the White House, and reinvigorate the old way of Republicans and Democrats working together for the benefit of Americans. And he outright said, we will lose democracy as we know it if Trump becomes president again. So given that President Trump's lock on the GOP nomination, as far as we can tell, barring, Deus ex machina, some event, God out of the machine, and given Biden's lock on the Democratic Party nomination, I think there's going to be plenty of support behind Manchin for an independent run to the White House. And so my prediction is that he's going to identify a Republican to run with, and that they're going to take a look at how RFK Jr.'s poll numbers show competitively in a three-way race, and they're going to turn it into a four-way race. And we're going to have a historic whatever you want to call it. We're going to have this fight for the White House, for the brass ring that we haven't seen in our lifetimes.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you got Cornel West and Jill Stein competing for the very left. All right, I'm going to be very quick here. The House is bracing for the long-awaited Ethics Committee report regarding Republican George Santos, who's got like a couple dozen indictments against him for fraud. He's made a lot of news, and the report is actually expected to come out by Friday. And although the last vote to expel him fell far short of what you need, 2/3, I think it was like only about 180 voted to expel him. I don't believe that he is going to survive. I think he will be out of Congress by the Christmas break. We'll see if that comes true. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.